But now we've come to the bad part of the dream. The dream where things no longer are good but instead go to being bad. I warned you about this bad part of the dream. It would come eventually, and then we would be affected by it. This part of the dream where things eventually go bad. Amsterdam.
This is one of the finest innovations from Zurich. It removes all pain.
Guys like me, we have to turn to booze and morphine, and that can lead to addiction. Oh, that's fast. That is advanced.
Yes, today we have Amsterdam. So Amsterdam came out this year in 2022, and it has all the people. It has just every major, well-known actor that would be in a film even remotely close to this, and some who might not even be in a film like this. People you'd be like, oh yeah, I could see Christian Bale being in this. Then you look and you see, that Mike Myers? Amsterdam is directed by a David O. Russell. If you're looking for previous bodies of work, actually, this guy's worked on some very big films, some of which I actually really enjoy. Most notably so, I think, would be to say he directed American Hustle, as well as one, I think even more popular, Silver Linings Playbook. People really liked that movie. So, a couple examples, but filmography is more extensive than that. So, like I said, in terms of the star power, there's a lot of people. You can see all their names in the poster, but without question, we have our three main stars. Two of which, household names, no need to really delve into their filmography. You got Christian Bale. It's Christian Bale. You know this guy. Everybody knows this guy. And you have Margot Robbie. Margot Robbie is also in this. Yes. And then we have the only one that I think ever requires some explanation, because he's gotten more and more popular, but I think people still, not a household name level, people still aren't 100% familiar. But we got John David Washington, who I personally enjoy his work from, if you're talking about recent stuff, Black Klansman, as well as a more recent film such as Tenet. So he's in Hollywood now. So yeah. Oh, Amsterdam, where to begin? I mean, look, you gotta be fair, right? The pros of the film. The film takes place in, I think it's 1920s, I think. We go back and forth between flashbacks and I think 1913, the 1910s, and then mostly the 1920s. So I like the period, especially for film and for the aesthetic and all that. So when I saw that in the trailer, I was like, yeah, I'm here for it. The settings, the places, the world, the environment, it's all done very well. I will say, some of the actors in this film bring good energy into their roles. I think Christian Bale, I was discussing with another friend who had seen this film, I think Christian Bale probably puts his whole Bale-ussy into this. He's really trying. He brings a lot of energy to the character. Some actors also bring energy into their characters, and I will leave it at that. I also, worth mentioning, the two separate narratives that are going on in the film, in their own right, intriguing. This attempted government conspiracy and the story of these three friends that formed a pact in Amsterdam and are now trying to reconnect and figure out this mystery together, while also still having part of their hearts tied to Amsterdam. Man, I'm getting to the bottom of the barrel here with the positives. Fully honest here. Before going into this, I had a friend show me the average score for this film from Rotten Tomatoes. And I try not to hinge too much of my opinion off of the review websites, but I saw the review for this, and my god, yeah, again, critics were like, oh, it's fucking dog shit. I'm like, it can't be that bad. It's pretty, I think it's bad. It's pretty weird, man. This film is weird. I was seeing it with a friend, and I think halfway through the first act, I just leaned over. It's the only comment I made the whole film. I leaned over and I said, this is a weird script. This is the weirdest script I've heard in a minute. The script and the delivery of lines is probably the weirdest, most unfortunate, disjointed part of this whole film. You have all these very talented actors who seem to be giving these almost wooden, phoned-in performances, more or less, just reading lines off a script. But it doesn't help because the script in itself is just weird, man. And the delivery's not as bad as it was in Old. Old was some of the worst delivery I had heard in a film in a hot minute, especially from a major blockbuster.
Put that down right now, Doctor.
Watch out, Darren!
Listen, I don't know why I did that. I thought he was going to hurt me. Sorry.
Sorry.
But even still, I mean, just, oh my god, this was so weird. I was doing research because I was wondering who wrote this shit, and it was the director. The director directed and wrote this, and I was like, well, hang on a second, that doesn't make any sense. The other films of his that I've watched I liked were actually, in my opinion, good. And upon looking further into it, I realized it was because American Hustle was only co-written by him. He wrote it with somebody else. And then Silver Linings Playbook, yes, he wrote it, but it's based off a novel. So it's more of an adaptation. It wasn't his script. Again, it was his script, but it was based off of a material. So when he co-writes and when he adapts, it's really good. But this stuff was just... There were some choices made in this film that it wasn't a dog shit film, but I don't think they were good choices. There's two main narrative threads throughout this film. When I said that each of them work respectively on their own, I meant just that. The whole film, especially from the trailer, it says most of this actually happened. Basically, early members of the Nazi Party, before the Nazi Party and before Hitler were even known, were trying to convince this general, this like glorified American World War general, to get a bunch of the veterans together and get them to basically elect a power without having to have an actual democratic election into the White House to be able to have more influence over things. And it was all done by this like committee of 5 huge conglomerates that were super shady people. This whole thing, that whole conspiracy existed. It's an interesting story, and it's a cool idea to adapt that to a film. But also spliced with that, you have the narrative of our 3 main characters, who 2 of which served in the war, one of which was a nurse that helped attend to their wounds in the war. And then they, after some sustained injuries that they survived through and were nursed back to health by this nurse, and one of them fell in love with the nurse, and 2 of them were already friends that respected each other together, and now they are 3 friends, and they decided to then kind of abandon their responsibilities and just live and thrive in their artistic inner fulfillments all in Amsterdam. The couple and then Christian Bale being a third wheel, which sounds like hell to me, but they seem to have a good time in Amsterdam. Because then eventually Christian Bale decides to head back to the States to go to his terrible shitty wife, and then leave his 2 friends behind. But then the other friend ends up coming with them because the Margot leaves. She just disappears when she finds out all this is gonna happen. And she's like, "This is we lived the good part of the dream, but now we're going to the bad part of the dream, and we'll always have Amsterdam." So the 2 go and do their thing, and then eventually, after living their own lives, successful doctor practice and lawyer practice, then they witness a murder after trying to investigate what was thought to be another murder that ends up being tied into this. So I mean, like, look, it could have all worked out well, but the thing is, I mean, each of these were separate good stories that like were self-contained, and then you started mixing them together. And the way this particular writer director mixed them together, like, what's the more important narrative here? Is it the fact that it's this conspiracy and this coup, or is it the friends and their lifelong bond? It just kind of keeps like, I guess maybe to some of you it might work, and I get that. It goes together, but in the way that like you're shoving 2 jigsaw pieces together where like one end is just missing a little, and you're like, it'll be fine. And like, no. Another big pet peeve of mine in films is I do not like overly expository dialogue. I don't like you to shove and spoon feed your exposition at me. Maybe some audiences do. And in some circumstances, there's certain things you really can only get across by having a character speak it from the script onto the screen to educate your audience. But it's that thing that films do where it's 2 characters that walk into a room, and in order to explain to the audience what happened, they'll say something where it's, "You know what happened to our mother those 5 years ago, and you've still never been able to let go because you have your own traumas to deal with. After you lost your eye back in the war, it was never the same between you and father." Like, oh my god, that's the worst. I hate it. And this film does that in spades. And not only does it have overly expository dialogue to explain to you what's going to happen, it over-explains it. It bashes you on the head with what's going to happen. It explains it to you 2 different times from 2 different characters, shows you visually what's going to happen, alludes to what's going to happen, and then somehow that's not good enough. It gets another character to explain in another way what's going to happen again. I will say, props to this film, I was never lost. I never was like, what's going on? Like, I knew exactly what was going on. I know too well what happens in that film, and I hate it, because this was one of the worst films I've seen this year. It was such a disappointment, and I can tell you, like, all the main plot elements that happened beat for beat, because every time something was happening, everybody in the room was talking about it happening. What is life anymore, man? For every, like, good film, there's, like, 5 ones that are kind of trying to pull this shit. Like, I don't get it. It has no subtlety. So he's gonna go give that speech, and the enemy only thinks they're getting what they want, but really, he's gonna go up there and give a different speech that's gonna explain what the bad guys are doing. And then he's like, so I'm going up there, I'm gonna go talk about something that might cost me my life in order to be able to preserve the, and then someone else is like, now, you might be wanting to give your speech, but really you should be giving our speech. And then literally, Christian Bale's voiceover comes into play. So what the general knew he was gonna do was he was gonna use himself as bait. He was gonna go up there and give the speech, and I'm just sitting there bashing my fucking head against the seat in front of me like, I get it! I fucking understand. I get the plot elements of what you're putting out on the table here. I understand that. No worries. You ain't lost me. I guarantee you ain't lost the other 8 people in the audience who came to watch this. There's so many great actors in this film that have done so much good work in their lives, and then you put them in here and you give them this like really weird ass script, and then you're like, all right, here, go. And then it's like, well, we need to figure out what's going on here. All right, should we do another take? And the director's like, no, that's good, it's okay. All right, wrap it up, Johnny. You got lunch in 5. Like, maybe a few more takes, maybe, like, a little bit better writing. I don't know. I can always see what someone was trying to do, but man, they missed the mark on this one. So my rating for Amsterdam, and this is this is me being very nice. In terms of personal enjoyment, I have no wish to see this film again. I would rather watch Don't Worry, Darling like 10 more times before I watch this film. However, there are quality aspects to this film. There were a couple scenes that made me chuckle. There were a couple scenes that were like heartfelt and where a little bit of emotion started to, a little ding, ding, on a little EKG meter reader for this fucking film. Like a little bit of life was breathed into this film. So credit where credit's due. The film is not dog shit. It's just pretty bad. It's just weird, awkward. It's just such a weird fucking script. Delivery is not terrible, but delivery is just kind of flat and wooden throughout a lot of this film. A very, very, very low 3 out of 5. A low 3 out of 5. This film is definitely below average. I almost went and gave it a high 2. But props where props are due. The direction, more or less, direction is solid enough. They were trying to kind of do some Wes Anderson vibes here and there. Direction's okay. The settings are great. Costumes are great. The actors themselves, I mean, they're not acting poorly. They're just trying to do their best with what they've been given. And the 2 separate narratives that are here are good, self-contained, just when they're trying to be meshed together. If there was, less exposition, less subtlety, if the performances were a bit smoother, if it was just maybe like some of the fat was trimmed off this film, if there was more focus, if all the ifs, ands, possibilities and all this film could have been, I think, good, borderline great. It could have been good at the very least, but as it was now, this film's not good. It's below average. I would say don't waste your money seeing it in theaters. Stream it later if you're curious. It could be a fun watch. I am so disappointed. I am so utterly disappointed by what this film ended up being. Because for once, it almost is never this way. The trailer was good. It's a good trailer, and the film was not. So that's all I gotta say about Amsterdam. Thank you guys and gals so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode of whatever movie I review. And goodbye, travelers.